Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the AP Top 25 here for college basketball. It's been a wonderful and crazy college basketball season up to this point. There's been a ton of movement throughout the top 25, a bunch of teams. When we talk about the Memphis team led by Penny Hardaway, there's also a bunch of other teams in here that have shifted up and down throughout this college basketball season. There's some that I predicted at the start and also some wild cards I was not expecting jumping way up into the top 25. We'll talk about that and more in this video, probably a little bit about the NBA draft. I'm really big into the NBA prospects, guys that I think are going to be big time players in the NBA and also good role players as well. I like to talk about those guys just as much as the star players. Honestly, there's a lot to break down, a lot to talk about from this crazy past week in college basketball. And we'll just talk about these programs a little bit too. So if this is something you guys are interested in the future, make sure to leave a like, subscribe as well, so you don't miss out on more content here at Utility Sports. This did come out December 27th. The video is coming out December 28th. I wanted to prep for it, plan, and really get my thoughts out in this video on this ranking. So I know it's not coming out the day these rankings came out, but it is just a day after. So hopefully you guys don't mind the wait too much. And now without further ado, let's jump into it here. We'll actually start with the others receiving votes. There's a couple on here that I do want to talk about. Illinois here with 72. Of course, Kofi Cockburn is fifth in the nation currently in scoring. I was surprised he came back last season after pulling his name out of the NBA draft. I thought he had played himself into probably a second round pick, decided to come back to college. Maybe just didn't receive a guarantee that he was going to get drafted like he would have wanted. And because of that, came back to the Fighting Illini, and I think it's been a pretty good choice for him. However, the team has definitely missed some of their guard play. I would assume not there anymore. And of course, Adam Miller transferred out as well. He was the guy I'd expected to take over before he announced his transfer to LSU. Of course, his season had been derailed by an ACL tear as well. So Adam Miller not playing even for the LSU Tigers at this point. But the Fighting Illini definitely could have used him this season had he been healthy and not transferred out. And their guard play is just letting them down a little bit. Kofi Cockburn, he's a really good college player. I don't necessarily see a ton for him at the NBA level. I think his play style is, a little bit more 1990s, mid 2000s style play rather than what we see now in 2021 as we're entering 2022 in the NBA. But college basketball, he's really good. He eats up a lot of space, good rebounder. And I think that it makes sense that they're the top team here outside the top 25. They haven't had the season they're expecting to have. But I still think they're a team when it comes to March Madness that could make some noise, even maybe slip into the Sweet 16. That would not be surprising to me, especially when you have such a good, strong big man at the college level. There is a lot that can happen for a team of that caliber. The 25 to 21, then we got Texas Tech, Wisconsin, Xavier, Villanova, and Providence here. So you notice three Big East teams, a Big 10 team, and a Big 12 team in here. And Texas Tech, I think they're one that I want to highlight here because of Chris Beard no longer being there, of course. That was a big loss for this program. However, they are holding on. They're in the top 25, 9-2 record at this point. It's a good season for them. Wisconsin as well. Think back to the days of Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker, when this team, upset the undefeated Kentucky Wildcats in the Final Four. They're not quite at that level anymore, but they have a really good program. They develop a lot of players, and they keep a lot of in-state guys as well. And I think it's a testament to this program to be in the top 25 based off of what their recruiting classes usually look like compared to some of the big dogs like Kentucky, Duke, and a few other schools out in the ACC, some schools in the SEC even. Big East does a really great job, and I think that's a key reason why we see so many Big East teams here now. 23 through 21, there's three straight of them, and they deserve to be in here. Xavier, I think one of those teams that got a little overhyped a little too quickly. A tough week for them here. They dropped down 5 spots. Villanova, they've had a tough go of things this season, but I trust this team. I'm not going to hit the panic button yet on Villanova. When you look at who they have as their head coach, Jay Wright, they are going to be just fine. I know they've had some bad losses. I don't think that they're a top 5, top 10 team, but I do think they're going to stick around in this top 25. I'm not panicked about them, and I think they'll make a little bit of noise when it gets to March Madness. Their roster maybe not as mature as they would have liked it to be by now, and especially when it comes to some decision making. They've struggled a little bit more with turnovers than they historically do, but I do think Villanova, they'll get back on track. Maybe not this year, but going into next year, I think they'll be just fine. I wouldn't panic about this program at all. They're a good program. They do things right, and I think they'll stick around in that top 25 this year. Providence, one of the more surprise teams this year at 11-1. This is a team I did not expect to be around that top 25. I don't believe they were in the preseason AP Top 25 poll. And it's surprising to me to see them here now, especially in that tough Big East Conference at 11-1. They're no slouches. A lot of credit due to them, to Providence. They've had a very good start to the year, and I'm hoping to see them continue. I think it'd be really good for this program. Hopefully, they can find some more recruits. I think about Chris Dunn so many years back when he was the big guy coming out of Providence, but at this point, I think that they do need a little bit more help when it comes to recruiting. I'm a Dayton Flyers fan myself, so I know what it's like to be, maybe not the highest recognizable school when it comes to college basketball. We had that crazy year with Obi Toppin, and it didn't really necessarily lead to a lot in terms of what we got as recruits and transfers. And I'm hoping that Providence is a different story here, that they can, really harness a lot of this success and lead it to bringing them a few top 100 players. That'd be really good for this program. And I think really good for college basketball as we see more smaller programs find success and find their little niches when it comes to the college basketball season. 20 through 16 here, we've got an interesting slate of teams. Colorado State in here representing the Mountain West. Not very often you see a Mountain West team in the top 25 for college basketball. Then we have a few SEC teams here as well, Alabama and Kentucky. Texas representing the Big 12 at 17, and then LSU, another SEC team at 16. Let's start here with Alabama. They're a tough team to talk about. Keon Ellis transferred in. He's a senior. Then you've also got a collection of guards. Javon Quinterly, we know he played college basketball in another school before, transferred into Alabama. He's a redshirt junior currently. And then you also have J.D. Davis in there, who is a true freshman, extremely athletic, was a top 10 recruit coming in from his high school class. And that kid can jump out the gym, but he doesn't necessarily assert himself in big games. A couple weeks ago against Memphis, they dropped a game there in Memphis. And Memphis only had one vote here in the AP Top 25. They're not that great of a team, but Alabama just did not play very well in that matchup. Of course, being on the road is always hard. Memphis is not a bad program, but that was a game that Alabama should have won. They were coming off that win against Gonzaga. It was going to be a big week for them, and they kind of let it down. They dropped that game to Memphis, another tougher week this week. They fall to 9-3 on the season. They're a team that they want to be in that top 10. They think that's where they can be. Of course, last year they had Herb Jones and also Josh Primo. Those are two key losses that they sustained from their team last year. Those guys would both be huge pieces to what they are currently. Herb Jones, of course, could not stay. Josh Primo chose not to stay and go to the NBA draft. But you're looking at, dropping 9 spots here in the AP Top 25 poll. That's really tough. That's a tough loss for Alabama. Kentucky, they move up 2 spots here. And boy, can they rebound the basketball. I know they're big. Grabbed 25 rebounds. He's top 5 in the nation right now when it comes to rebounding. I believe he might even be top in the nation. They've also got some nice depth pieces. Jacob Toppin, the brother of Obi Toppin, coming off the bench. He's given them some nice minutes this past week. They're at 9-2 in the SEC. Maybe a little disappointing based off where they were to start the year. But I think they've got the pieces to probably get back into that top 10 if they pick up their play. Texas at 17, their team I thought was going to be in that top 10 all year long as well. They just have disappointed me a little bit there. New head coach, they come in. You got nice transfers in Devin Askew and Marcus Carr. I feel like I've talked about the Longhorns a bunch this season. I think that they need to kind of really find their identity and find who they are. Biggest thing for them, they don't have big men like they used to. You look at this program historically, guys like Jericho Sims, you had Jackson Hayes, you also have had a lot of other good big men in there as well. There's a few I know I'm missing off the top of my head here, but Texas is usually a good program when it comes to big men development. This year, they just don't quite have it. Even last year, they had Greg Brown at the forward spot. And I guess another one would be Kai Jones, another guy they lost from last season. That would be a big guy for them to have at this moment, too. That would be really good for the Longhorns. I think they need a little bit more help in the front court. Not sure if this will be their year now because of some of my question marks with who they have at the big man positions, especially when you consider some of the strengths of the other top teams this season. LSU at 16, they've been one of the feel-good stories, 12-0. Will Wade's team is balling out. They've got a lot of different guys who can give you quality minutes. I thought when Adam Miller went down that their season was going to be tarnished. Adam Miller, I expected him to have a huge role for Will Wade, similar to what Cam Thomas did for him a year ago. Adam Miller, not quite the creator that Cam Thomas was, but I saw a lot of production coming that way. Adam Miller had really shined for USA U19 en route to winning the gold in the World Cup. He ended up tearing out his ACL, and I kind of had concerns about LSU. They've silenced my doubts. They find themselves 16th in the nation, and they're going to ascend higher if they keep playing basketball the way that they have been Very, very productive, very good season from them so far, and I look to see more of that continuing. 15 to 11 here, we also have some interesting teams. We're looking at Seton Hall at 15. They've developed a few NBA players in that program as of late, and I think they've continued to do that. They've shown themselves to be a good program in that Big East. I continue to hype up the Big East. They've got a lot of really good college basketball teams, and I think they do deserve a lot of credit for the competition level in that conference, because that conference doesn't get talked a lot about in other sports, especially college football, which we do on the channel here as well. We don't really talk about the Big East too much. However, Big East in college basketball is extremely good. And then 14, we got the Tennessee Volunteers. They're led by Kennedy Chandler, the point guard. He was part of U19 USA basketball as well. He was very productive for the USA in the World Cups, and I think he's been a key part of what Tennessee's been as well. They find themselves at 9-2. They've had a good season. Some people might be questioning, why would a 12-0 LSU team in the SEC be below a 9-2 Tennessee team? A lot of that has to do with resume, who they've beat, who they've played against, and also the overall strength of their roster. Tennessee, to me, it does make sense that they are above LSU just at this point in the season. However, if LSU continues to win games at the rate they have been, I could see LSU jumping them. 13, we got Ohio State here, the Buckeyes, led by forward E.J. Liddell. He's been huge for them this year. He's averaging north of 20 points a game. He's been massive for this program. You saw this coming last year. Anyone who watches the Buckeyes knows how big of a player he is for them. And it's not a surprise to see them up here in the top 13. I saw them as a top 25 team, but with how they played this year in the Big Ten, 8-2 record currently, they're definitely deserving to be this high in the rankings. Houston at 12 in the AAC, 11-3 record. They're a harder team to kind of pinpoint because they've produced some NBA talent as well, guys like Quentin Grimes in the past. But it's harder to really rank a team like this, specifically when you look at what their average level of competition is. They're a team that if they got into the college basketball, into the March Madness bracket, and then they lost early, I would not be fully surprised by that just based off the level of competition they usually have. I expect them to win their conference. We'll see if they can get it done throughout this season. 11, we got Auburn. I think this is one of the best teams to talk about this season. They've had a collection of really good production from really good players. Jabari Smith, of course, is the headliner. Everyone knows about him, 6'10" forward. He's going to be arguably the #1 pick in the NBA draft. He's for sure a top 3 pick, maybe top 4. Kind of depends on who ends up in the top 3 because you're looking at Paolo Banchero, Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith, and then Jaden Ivey as well, the point guard from Purdue. And it depends on what team really wants what. You know, some team might want a pure score and they go with Banchero. A team might want a big man who could be transformational for an organization. That would be Chet Holmgren. And a team might be really point guard needy and pull the trigger on Jaden Ivey. And then Jabari Smith might be sitting there as the pretty beautiful option at pick 4 as well. I mean, he's a phenomenal smooth shooter of the basketball, can handle the ball a little bit, good decision maker as well, does not stop the ball too often on the perimeter or in the post. I do a lot when it comes to draft analysis, draft evaluation. So if you guys want more of that on the channel, make sure to comment that down below. But it doesn't just stop there for Auburn. I think a key player that I want to highlight in this one, Walker Kessler. He was also a Georgia kid, played in Georgia, and he's had a huge role on this Auburn team, specifically when you consider his fit next to Jabari Smith. Jabari Smith plays that power forward position almost all the time, and Walker Kessler's really been holding down the paint at center, averaging over 3.5 blocks a game for Auburn this season, and he's been huge next to Jabari Smith. He functions very well as the guy who's going to do some of the dirty work that Jabari Smith just doesn't get involved with. Jabari Smith, a little bit more finesse. Walker Kessler holds down the paint, protects the rim, and they really need that, and he's been huge for them. That's why they find themselves at 11-1, and I think this team has an extremely high ceiling just based on the actual fit of their roster. They play together really well. Everyone's got assigned roles, and I think even with their early season loss, Jabari Smith's getting better every single game, and I think this team could really go the distance this year. Moving into the top 10 now, we've got some really great teams in here too, of course. Michigan State, they were one I highlighted in the preseason saying, do not be surprised if a Tom Izzo team ends up outperforming where people are currently ranking them. That's been the case this year. They've consistently rose throughout these rankings, now find themselves 10th. Arizona, they dropped down to 9. It's a disappointing week for them. Suffered a loss, of course. They're in the Pac-12, but Benedict Mathurin, another really good draft pick prospect. He's going to be someone that you want to keep your eyes on throughout all of college basketball. He's a really good two-way wing, plays very well off the ball, and I think that's huge for Arizona. They're always fun to watch because usually Bill Walton, you'll get him calling a couple of their games that are out in the Pac-12. And that's always a good time for sure. Very good in entertainment if you're looking for some for college basketball. The Arizona Wildcats, very fun product to watch. They've been good throughout this year. I'm not really hitting the panic button on them yet. When you have a player like Benedict Mathurin and you've got a really good defensive scheme like they do, you can go a long ways in college basketball. And I think they're going to be a team that when we get to the March Madness time of the season, we're going to be talking about them deep into that Elite Eight, maybe even Final Four. They're that special. Iowa State, the Cyclones, produce a lot of NBA talent as well. And this year, no different. They've got some really good players on this team. Big 12, they're 12-0. They are a legit team in the top 8 here. I'm very impressed with what I've seen from them. Moving into USC at 7, another team, Pac-12, 12-0. They have been very good, and Isaiah Mobley is a key reason why. He's definitely progressed his game. He's going to be someone who's a second-round draft pick for sure, I would have to guess, this year in the NBA, maybe even a back-end first-round guy. Last year, I kind of liked him as a, pick 45 type player. Chose not to come out. I was hoping he did, but now I'm hoping to see him land in a good situation next season after the draft this year, because I think he provides a lot, can space the floor, pretty big as well, kind of similar to his brother, Evan, who's playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers now. He's not as good as Evan, but he does a lot of those similar things. He can protect the rim a little bit, can stretch the floor out a little bit, has good feel as a passer. He doesn't stop the ball, and there's a lot of value to that. USC, they've got a very team-oriented game, and they play very good, sound basketball. Pick 6, we got Kansas, Bill Self. Here, Ochai Agbaji. He's clearly the player to highlight. He's top 5 in the nation in scoring as well. At this point in the season, they're 9-1 in the Big 12. And they're another team that I think they're going to be dangerous. Their one loss this year does come to my Dayton Flyers. Malachi Smith led that team for the Flyers against Kansas, but Kansas outplayed the Dayton in that entire game. Kansas just wasn't hitting shots in the second half, and it's really hard for me to see Kansas down at 6 because outside of that Dayton game that they lost, that's really the only blemish on their record at this point. Had they won that game, which I think is what they really deserve to do, it was a crazy buzzer beater that Dayton hit to win. And remember, I'm a Dayton fan. There's no bias in this. I think Kansas deserved to win that game. They didn't, but I would have them a little bit higher here, but it's tough because the top 5 right now in college basketball is really, really good. And I can't really blame the committee either for putting them at 6 because you look at how strong the top 5 is here. We'll move into number 5 here, UCLA. They've got some good pieces as well. I've talked about them exclusively on the channel quite a bit. There's a lot of continuity on this roster when you look at what they were last year when they made that Final Four run. Almost took down Gonzaga last year, could not get it done before ultimately Baylor did take down Gonzaga in the national championship. But UCLA, Pac-12 8-1 record at this point. Of course, their one loss did come to Gonzaga this year, and Gonzaga really walked all over them. But we see UCLA staying right at number 5 this week. I think this is deserved. They got some really nice pieces. Johnny Juzang, I think his experience last year in college basketball and in March Madness is going to help him this year, and I think it's going to help this Bruins team. I see them going really deep as well. 4 here, we've got Gonzaga. Of course, they've had a little bit more of a bumpy stretch as of late. Their loss to Alabama is kind of the one big one on their record. Of course, also their face-off with Duke was kind of indicative of where their ranking currently sits at 4. But I think it's not a bad ranking. They're probably going to lock up a 1 seed when it comes to the actual tournament. And that's going to be good enough for them. They need to, still work some kinks out. I think they need to find a little bit more offensive flow for Chet Holmgren when it comes to the half court, but he's not really that type of player. He doesn't assert himself as often as a guy like Boncaro does, or even like a guy like Juzang, who's a little bit more offensive half court focused. Chet Holmgren's kind of the glue player. He does a lot for them. Protects the paint. He's top 5 in the nation in blocks per game. And he also is really good in transition. He's going to push the ball. He's going to be able to take rebound and run. He's also going to be able to hit ahead passes. And I think a lot of the stuff he does is perfect next to Drew Timme. Those two got really good chemistry in the front court. RJ Nembhard as well, Andrew Nembhard has been having a good season for them too. He had a really great game against UCLA. He's been a little bit more up and down than those 2 bigs and Holmgren and Timme, which is what you'd expect because he's not quite the caliber of those two, but he's still a nice player and he's going to have to be big for them. One player I'm looking at for them coming off the bench, Hunter Salas. I want to see if he starts getting more minutes. He's a 6'5" guard. I had a lot of hopes for him. He hasn't necessarily lived up to them quite yet this year, but I think maybe as time goes throughout the season, maybe he picks up to speed a little bit more and becomes a little bit more consistent of a player for them. Purdue at 3, Big Ten team, 11-1 record. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm probably the biggest Jaden Ivey fan in the nation. I love what this kid does with the basketball. He's decisive. He's extremely quick, fun to watch, and I mean explosive as well. In the open court, he makes some things happen, and I'm like, oh my gosh. He was very, very reminiscent of Ja Morant in a lot of ways, and I'm talking about the good ways. He is a really good guard, and Purdue is going to live or die with him. The biggest thing for me, Caleb Furst hasn't been as productive as I thought he would be early in the season. They've relied on some of their other players, some of their other bigs, but they've got enough pieces there. I think they're, maybe an elite scorer away from being a super top end team where they would be for sure the favorites to walk out of it with the championship, but it's hard. There's not a ton of elite scorers in college basketball, if you ask me. Purdue, they're a well-built team. They defend really well, and Jaden Ivey, he's the heart and soul of that team. He's going to get out and push, and really is the true example of what a sophomore guard can look like when he really takes his craft seriously, hones in the next year, and becomes that lead dog. Number 2, here we got Duke at 11-1 out of the ACC. They've got a ton of good pieces as well on this team. There's no surprise seeing Duke up here, especially when you consider what Paulo Banchero has been for them as a scorer. He's been smooth. He's averaging about 18 points a game, and it's within the flow of the offense for the most part as well. He doesn't really isolate too often, and when he does, it's designed. Coach K is getting the most out of these guys in his final season there at Duke, and I think it's going to be a really good season. But you see, they don't have any first place votes. That's because they all went to Baylor here. All 61 votes did go first place for Baylor. They had 1,525 points in this poll, so clearly a massive gap here between them and Duke. And it's deserved. 11-0, Big 12 basketball, and they've had huge step-ups from some of their younger guards. You're looking at a freshman-sophomore guard combo. They've been huge for them this year. Those two are leading them in scoring. And then those returning frontcourt players, they've also been good. Mayer, one guy I want to talk about, he's been nice for them coming off the bench last year. I think he's still coming off the bench this season, if I'm not mistaken. So it's no surprise to see Scott Drew's team here in the top spot just because of what he is as a coach. I think he deserves a ton of credit for what they are. It's hard to be starting a freshman guard and have him leading your team in scoring and to be the best team in the nation, but that's what they're doing. They've been very productive, and I expect more of this to continue throughout the year. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this AP Top 25 video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe as well if you're new, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.